this is Ron again. Welcome back to my channel. This is the next episode on the 71 Kawasaki F5 Bighorn restoration. As you can see, I've got the frame back and all my black parts powder coated, all my aluminum parts vapor blasted. They came out really nice. I really can't put much together because I'm getting all the original hardware zinc plated, re-zinc plated. So the only thing I can really do is I'm working on the wiring harness and I'm starting to put the motor together. I'll bring it over here, see what I'm doing. So on these engines, you put everything in the right side of the case. Transmission was really tricky because everything basically has to go on kind of the same time, and it was a challenge, but I just took my time. I got the crank bearing in the right side, Kickstarter thing in. What I like to do that makes it easier, I worked over 20 years as a Ferrari certified auto body technician, and we had to work with a lot of aluminum, the certified aluminum welder. Also, we did a lot of mechanical, we did a lot of race cars and a lot of suspension work. And with Ferraris, all the suspension parts are aluminum and they don't come with the bushings in the control arms or the shocks, mostly because the street car would use a rubber bushing, and the race cars would use, it was kind of like a polyurethane, much stiffer. And what we learned after ruining the first control arm we tried to do, which was $2,200 for one control arm, and we destroyed it trying to press in the bushing, we learned, okay, heat and cold is your friend. So what I do to put the bearings in these cases is the day before I'll put the bearings in a Ziploc bag, put them in the freezer, and then I'll take my little MAP gas and I'll warm up the case where the bearing goes. Not crazy hot, but this stuff takes heat really fast. About 100 degrees Celsius. I don't know offhand what that is Fahrenheit. I got used to working with everything with metric and Celsius, working for Ferrari. You get it to about 100 degrees Celsius, take out your bearing from the freezer, and if you're lucky, it'll just drop in. Sometimes it'll go a little bit and it'll just stop, but at least it's already started. And then what I'll do, I'll use the old bearing, like this is a right crank bearing. There's the transmission bearing. I'll use an old one, and since it only went in part way sometimes, I'll use this to pound it all the way until it goes flush, and that really makes it easier. And what I like to do to make sure my transmission is working properly, I'll pre-assemble the cases with everything in except the crank and just put a couple bolts in it so I can run through all the gears. And what really helps is you spin the main shaft imitating like the motor's running, and it helps the gears fall into place because they've got little teeth, and if they're spinning, it only has to go a little bit and it'll fall into place, because it's a lot of work to take one of these apart. You want to do it right the first time, so that's why I found out that it's much easier to do a test fit with all the bearings in but no crankcase, so then it just comes right apart. Once you get the crank in, it's pressed into the crank bearings, and you have to do like I originally did, where you have to use a puller, and I actually have a puller to pull it in to the right side. Here it has a little nut you put on the end of the crank and then use the original nut to hold it, and then you just crank it down, and what it'll do, it'll pull the crank into the crank bearing, because you don't really want to use heat on the bearings. You could use a little bit with maybe a heat gun to help, and what I even do to make it easier is I'll put the crankshaft in a Ziploc bag and put it in the freezer overnight too, so you know, when things get cold they contract, and of course you heat it up, they expand. So you can use a little heat, but since I have a puller, I will just, when I'm ready to do it, after I've already test fitted the, you know, case together, make sure the trans work, I'll use my puller to pull it in there, and then I'll put the cases together with my basically Yamabond Kawasaki Bomb sealer. Another thing that's an advantage, when you test fit, you make sure everything looks nice and flat, which these cases, you can see how nice the vapor blasting does, where if you just sandblast it, it puts little pits because it actually peens it, and you touch it with your finger, it actually leaves a fingerprint, where these, with the glass beads, they're so small and at low pressure, 60 PS or less, it's like a polish. So, you know, I highly recommend vapor blasting. And then before I put anything together, I'll take my tap and tap through all the holes, take brake cleaner, blow them out and blow everything out to make sure there's no residue. The sandblaster that did these vapor blasts, he had them super clean anyway, but you know, just to be sure, I'll clean them again. I've had a lot of powder coating done over the last 20 years, and by far, this is the best I've ever seen. It's super, super nice. I just so tickled with how it came out. I'm waiting for a lot of parts. I've already got my VIN decal. You go on eBay, and for popular bikes, you can find companies that make it up when you got to send them a picture of your original. And so I've already got that. I got to get my decals for the body set and fenders ordered. And also there's a little decal here. I think it says something about it's ISO metric. And then there's a decal here. So, you know, that's why I say I want it to look as close to original as possible. And you can see how nice everything comes out when it's vapor blasted. Some of the stuff is heavily pitted, so there's really nothing you can do about that. You can see the pits, but that's the thing when you get an old bike. You know, if you're going, you know, way over the top of the bike, you can look and see if you can find new stock parts that are good, or you can actually, before you get it vapor blasted, you can sand them out. It's a lot of work. It's just like, how far do you want to go? And a lot of this stuff from Kawasaki was painted silver, like the cases were. And I think I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, I prefer not having paint on my engine. So when I clean them, I'm not taking paint off. So the next thing I'm going to do is, this is a needle bearing, and this is a roller bearing for the transmission, and then this is just like, well, that's the right side. I've got it in the freezer, the left side crank bearing. It's all, heat the cases up in one at a time, get those in, and then I will temporarily put the cases together with a couple of screws and make sure my transmission is shifting in all the gears. I tested as best I could before putting together. It's just this shaft here, there's no circlip on the outside. There is on this, so this doesn't go anywhere. This will fall out. both transmission gears will start walking out. So if you have it in the case, in the bearings, it's exactly where it should be. So it's much easier to test fit it to make sure you got no problems, nothing's binding. And from experience, it's worth the extra time. You can see here my cylinder and cylinder head, and just look how nice that is. It's just vapor blasting is your friend. So one thing I discovered on these Bighorns is this is the shift rod for the shifter. So I have three motors, one from the 75, this is the one from the 71, and then I bought the 70 motor just for parts. I needed another clutch cover, and at the time the clutch covers, nice ones, were going for $150. I found a complete lower end, everything except the cylinder and piston and head, for 75 bucks, and it gave me a lot of extra parts. So sometimes you can get really good deals. Thing with the 70, up until like halfway through the model year, there's a lot of stuff. The crank is different. They started using different bearings because I guess they had some failures. The kickstart gear is different. So there's really not a lot I can use. I think the transmission's probably the same, but my other two transmissions that I already got apart look great. So what I'll probably do when I get both the 71 and the 75 done, I'll take this all apart and build it and just sell it as a nice lower end for somebody that's got a 70, and because I got it so cheap. So yeah, these are parts for my 75, more inside parts for the 75. I got all my black parts up here and up here. I got my tank for, I want to paint the 75 like the 74 because I really like the gold. I had 372 H2s, and the second one I did in the candy gold. Those were only available in Europe, and I just really liked them, and that's one of the bikes I wished I kept because I really like candy gold. So at this point, I think I'm just going to show you how I put the bearings in and then wrap it up, because I really can't do much more until I get my hardware. So I'll set the camera up so you can kind of see what I'm doing. It'd be easier if I had a GoPro I could wear on my head, but for now I'll just try to make do with what I got. So I gotta find my map gas. I put it somewhere. Oh, I see it. Here it is. So we'll start with the transmission bearing here. Now on these bearings, on one side they'll have writing, and on Kawasaki they always want you to put them in so when you take the motor apart you can see the type of bearing in it. Some of them, like the right crank bearing, they're actually different. This is the side that's got the groove because it's actually got a locking plate, but the one for the left side, it's the same for side by side, but you want to put it in so the letters out. And how I drive it in, I'll use the old bearing I took out to drive the new one in, or sometimes I'll just use a socket that fits enough to cover the outside of the race of the bearing, so you don't want to hit it in between. It's just going to blow the bearing apart. So I'll show you real quick how I do one bearing, and And I think that's good for today on this video. So what I do is I want to get it pretty warm. This takes heat pretty fast. Grab it out of the freezer. Okay, make sure I got numbers on the outside. Okay, it went in a little bit. I'm going to take my old bearing. See, the last I changed the tone, it's all the way down. It's done.